That's not what I read. The true sign of the apocalypse is someone that dumb has a law degree. Worse, if your name has the word sun in it, there's no excuse for not knowing how an eclipse works. But it's no surprise that Joy is the one who understands science. She's been on the science diet for years.
No, nothing really comes to mind. I was like, Shijing, listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be, this should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last, they call them Hitler, they call these things, America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball to Sunny.
What started as another smug, sanctimonious sermon from The View's resident race-baiting professor turned into a full-blown televised demolition. Greg Gutfeld didn't just clap back. He launched a sarcasm-laced missile. And Tyrus? He cracked open the archives and served Sunny a plate of facts so raw, Gordon Ramsay would have fainted. This wasn't a discussion. It was a public unraveling. Sunny Hostin entered with her usual high horse and left buried under the rubble of her own hypocrisy. One second she's preaching reparations like she's been personally oppressed by every century, and the next, she finds out she's a direct descendant of European slave owners. Let that sink in. The drama hit DEFCON levels when Sunny appeared on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show meant to explore ancestry but accidentally unearthed the most ironic twist of the year. Imagine pushing racial guilt while sipping champagne on generational wealth, only to discover you were part of the oppressive lineage. That's not a twist. That's poetic justice with a plotline. And if you thought the meltdown ended there, think again. Gutfeld didn't even have to step foot on set. His takedown echoed from another studio like a sniper shot of logic. Tyrus didn't yell. He didn't flinch. He pulled out historical receipts that made Sunny's outrage look like cosplay. The woman who lectures America daily on privilege was hit with a dose of reality that not even The View's editors could spin. She tried to pivot. "I always thought I was just Puerto Rican," she mumbled, clearly blindsided by the revelation. Then came the kicker. "My family owned slaves?" Cue the internet flipping that stunned face into a viral meme titled, "When Victimhood Collides with DNA." It was less a daytime debate and more a slow-motion collapse of a carefully curated narrative. Sunny was so caught off guard, she went from righteous to rattled in 60 seconds flat. This wasn't just a roast, it was a full-on ideological bonfire. And Sunny, she walked straight into it holding a match. Tyrus shut it down without theatrics. He didn't need to scream. The receipts screamed for him. He exposed her contradictions with surgical precision, while Sunny sat there unknowingly narrating her own undoing like a villain in denial. You could practically hear the air deflate from The View's studio. This wasn't the first time Sunny used her seat as a soapbox, but this time, the box collapsed. In the end, it wasn't Gutfeld or Tyrus who destroyed Sunny Hostin's credibility. It was Sunny herself, unarmed in the war of facts, dressed in moral superiority, and ambushed by her own bloodline. Sunny Hostin just earned herself the MVP of delusion, because without her unintentional comedy routine, that election might have actually been competitive. She lobbed a question so absurd, it shifted the national conversation, not toward progress, but into full-blown parody. And when she opened her mouth, all you could hear was the sound of credibility collapsing like a folding chair under pressure. The second she implied voters of color were somehow too confused to know what's good for them unless they voted exactly how she dictated, she crowned herself the queen of elitist arrogance. But here's the problem with building your castle on condescension. Eventually, someone's gonna bulldoze it. Enter Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus, who didn't even need a studio audience to leave Sunny metaphorically face down on the debate floor. One by one, they flung facts like grenades, and Sunny responded with the intellectual firepower of a confused emoji. And now, she's scrambling. You see, when reality checks bounce, all that's left is whining. They're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. That's Sunny's entire rebuttal. No substance, no argument. Just recycled elitist panic from someone whose worldview cracked like a wine glass under truth's pressure. Let's rewind. This is the same woman who suggested an entire segment of the population couldn't possibly form their own opinions unless they parroted hers. Why? Because in Sunny's world, dissent isn't discussion. It's disobedience. And if you're not on her script, you're either misinformed, brainwashed, or banned from brunch. But Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't even need to show up to annihilate the charade. They just hurled cold, hard data from the sidelines. And Sunny? She responded like someone who brought a participation trophy to a knife fight, swinging wildly with a foam bat in a room full of chainsaws. And if you're wondering whether The View self-corrected after that, of course not. It doubled down like a gambler on a losing streak. Watch that Eclipse episode. The panel tried to sound scientific, but ended up looking like a failed audition for Flat Earth, the musical. Whoopi nodded like she'd just read a Wikipedia summary, Navarro sighed with end-of-the-world intensity, and Joy Behar nodded off mid-fact like she was mentally organizing her lunch order. That's The View in its purest form. Synchronized delusion, carefully choreographed affirmations, and a deep fear of logic. It's not a talk show. It's an echo chamber in full HD. Every time Sunny drops a hot take that's colder than an ice bath, the other hosts react like they're under strict obedience training. The nodding, so robotic it deserves its own sound effect. And when things spiral, the defense protocol activates like clockwork. Drop some buzzwords, misinformation, dangerous rhetoric, wrap them in self-righteous despair, and boom, crisis averted. Except this time, it wasn't. Because America didn't buy it. The voters Sunny condescended to, they didn't just reject her ideas, they rejected the entire illusion. So here we are, a crumbling narrative, an exposed ancestry, and a credibility implosion broadcast in real time. And Sunny, she's still on that high horse, galloping toward another intellectual cliff with no seatbelt, no brakes, and no idea who's watching. And instead of owning up to the lie, what do? Double down with the grace of a toddler caught red-handed. Let her keep it up. Every time Sunny runs her mouth, another voter flips red. At this rate, the Senate, the House, and the White House might as well send her a thank you card. Keep digging, Sunny. Every meltdown is a Republican fundraiser. Meanwhile, Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't walk into The View like guests. They came in like demolition experts without warning signs. No fake smiles, no phony pleasantries, just surgical strikes of logic and street-level truth that made The View's bubble burst in real time. They didn't yell. They didn't flinch. They dismantled the narrative like two guys taking out the trash on a Tuesday. And Sunny, she flailed like someone trying to swat down a swarm of facts she didn't see coming. What's more satisfying than watching a woman who's used to applause at every breath suddenly face silence so loud it echoed? Sunny's monologue fell flat. No cheers, no claps, just the brutal thud of reality. Then came the implosion. It was supposed to be just another preachy pity party hosted by Sunny, full of half-baked outrage and identity-laced moral grandstanding. But then, boom, enter Gutfeld and Tyrus, unbothered and utterly lethal. In one comment, they scorched her entire argument to ashes. Sunny's sermon about white women clinging to patriarchy backfired so hard it should be classified as an own goal. The claim that white suburban moms are just agents of the patriarchy trying to protect their husbands and sons. Reality check. Sunny, who writes her opinions with crayons handed to her by her husband, accusing others of submission. That's comedy gold. The topic? Crime and policing. Sunny handled it with the nuance of a Yelp reviewer who didn't like her barista's tone. Her take? That criminals are misunderstood poets and cops are the real villains. She delivered it with the fervor of someone quoting hashtags instead of statistics. Then came Greg. Cool as a corpse, armed with real numbers, and laced with sarcasm sharp enough to cut concrete. His jab? That the loudest voices against police live in zip codes protected by gated security and off-duty cops. They defund for others, not themselves. Sunny's face? Like someone being asked for their Wi-Fi password under pressure. The air vanished. You could feel it. Sunny stuttered, pivoted, and then panicked. The conversation didn't just change course, it veered straight into the jaws of embarrassment. And then Tyrus struck. Calm, calculated, lethal. He didn't shout, he didn't even blink. He laid out a spreadsheet of violent crime data from cities that bought into the defund fantasy. Then he called out the rich hypocrites, Sunny included, who hire private protection while lecturing America on community safety. His tone, like a man explaining gravity to someone who insists the sky is purple. Then Gutfeld nuked the set. A one-liner so savage it turned the segment into a viral crime scene. The debate was over. Sunny tried to claw her way back with buzzwords and vague appeals to feelings, but her argument had already caught fire, and no one was bringing water. Tyrus wasn't done. He aimed for the heart of The View's rotten core. the race hustlers who poison the discourse while pretending to clean it up. He called it straight. If a CEO let a white host talk about black people the way Sunny talks about whites, they'd be gone in seconds. So why does Sunny get a pass? Because daytime TV has turned victimhood into a brand. Then came the hammer. Tyrus said the quiet part out loud. The View doesn't speak for America. They speak for their brunch circle. Sunny has more in common with a Malibu realtor than the working mom watching from a 2-bedroom apartment. She's not for the people. She's for the camera. Sunny blinked, stared, and said, "Nothing." Just static behind the eyes. You could hear the CPU overheating. Meanwhile, Joy Behar sat like a deer in the headlights, whispering, "Abort mission" under her breath, praying someone would cue the next segment. The audience, glued, confused, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or run for cover. The meltdown was so epic, social media ignited instantly. Twitter turned Sunny's silence into a meme. She became a walking symbol of how fast smug moralism crumbles when it meets actual resistance. And The View's next move? Pretend it never happened. They opened the next episode with puppies doing yoga. Because nothing says, "We're not spiraling" like dogs in Downward Dog. No apology, no acknowledgement, just denial on full display with a side of distraction. It's almost artistic how deluded they are. A crew of pundits so wrapped up in their own echo chamber, they can't hear the laughter outside the bubble. But it gets worse. Sunny then tried to rewrite the narrative mid-show. Suddenly, she wasn't the queen of the soapbox. She was the wounded victim of aggression. Her shift from prosecutor to damsel was so fast it caused whiplash. But that's the playbook. Throw punches, then cry when someone swings back. She thrives in the applause of people who've never heard the other side. But when the walls fall, she blames the collapse on everyone but herself. And this is the same woman who once suggested climate change caused a solar eclipse. Yes, really? She makes astrology look like physics. The real tragedy? The View is a symptom of a bigger disease. A media culture where shouting feels like substance, and groupthink passes for insight. Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't just win an argument, they tore down the fourth wall and exposed the performance. Sunny's breakdown wasn't just a flop, it was a warning. The age of the unchallenged pundit is over. So here's your takeaway. Sunny walked in with attitude. Greg dropped facts, Tyrus brought receipts. And Sunny? She dissolved into incoherence. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a reckoning. And for once, reality got a mic.